Welcome to my world.
I should probably get out of here.
Gale force winds be coming your way.
Jackpot! Jackpot!
Jack!
Jackpot! Jackpot! Jackpot!
Twice rounds on me.
I can't believe this is happening to me.
Jackpot! Extra ball. I said ball.
Yeah, you're doing good.
This is even worse than when you ate that bubblegum out of the garbage. Ryan, did you get into the garbage last night?
No.
Who's gonna protect me from the evil monkey in my closet? All right, in my closet.
Thank you so much, and hello, Seattle. I have my own company, and it has two people in it, me and my wife. And she's there because I need food and things. And she supports my efforts so that I can work 7 days a week making pinball audio. But I'm going to go and spend 5 minutes establishing who I am and why you might care to hear what I have to say, my creds. Set the way back to 1980. So this talk, as a sound guy, doesn't have a whole lot to do with electromechanical machines. It would have been interesting to do those chime things. And I, in fact, did a little chime action once, and I'll get to that. But I started in 1980. The context here is Gottlieb. Is Bally had Space Invaders and Pac-Man by 1980. Williams had Defender. Gottlieb had New York, New York, and No Man's Land, which none of you have ever heard of. Has anybody ever heard of those two games? And you shouldn't. They licensed them from some Japanese game company. Now, Bally Midway did the same thing and really did well with Space Invaders and Pac-Man. And Gottlieb, who believed that video games were a fad, didn't invest anything in internal development for video games and purchased those two games, and they did horribly. So, at that time, Gottlieb had been sold to Columbia Pictures, and the word came down from headquarters, you need to get serious about this. Video games are not a fad. So my career starts in a time, in terms of pinball, which was not really good for pinball. Pinball was kind of at a low ebb in the early 80s. Okay, that's the first game. It took 18 months from the time they said make a video game till the time Gottlieb was able to build a hardware board, hire engineers, make tools, find somebody to do the sound. The soundboard that I used was the same board that had been in use in pinball for about 18 months at that time. It was the first Gottlieb solid-state pinball board that talked. And I don't know what game Mars. Something of Mars was, I am the god of war, Mars kind of thing. Well, actually, it sounded like, I am the god of war. And there's a very talented designer at Gottlieb Pinball, which was completely a different facility at that time. We were in a warehouse in Bensonville, away from the pinball guys. They didn't like us. And they gave me the soundboard and gave me one example, a chunk of source code, and said, hit it, kid. And so that was the first one. Tim Skelly was the only experienced person in that division. He had done a whole lot of vector games for Cinematronics, some of which had been quite successful. We did a second game, and I won't even talk about that because they never made it. The third game, however, did okay. That's my favorite. See, the speech, for Reactor, they forced me to use the talking soundboard because, well, it was on the board, and they really wanted it to talk because they had a talking soundboard. So at times when you did a certain thing, they would want it to say like 10,000 bonus points. Well, 10,000 bonus points. That's what they wanted it to do. However, at that time, there were no development tools for this, and you basically started with a dictionary, that broke down the speech into phonemes, and a list of numbers that corresponded to the phonemes that the Votrax chip could do. And I spent days trying to find the magic combination of phonemes that would enable the soundboard to say 10,000 bonus points. There was something about this chip, it couldn't say everything. And 10,000 bonus points is one of the things it could not say. No matter what I did, it inevitably turned out to say 10,000 bogus points.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And I would spend a lot of time. I spent a whole day, 9 hours, trying this, trying that, putting Z's in the middle, just everything I could possibly think of. And there's this phenomenon when you work on something for a while called habituation, where if you do it long enough, you think you've won. So then somebody innocently would walk through the lab, and I'd grab them by the shirt and say, come here, come here, come here, come here. And I'd play it. And they'd look at me and go, what are bogus points? So being very frustrated with this chip, I said, well, screw this. This is really irritating me. What if I just put random numbers into the chip? And so that's how you get Q*bert's voice. Those are random numbers being stuffed into the chip. And you can make it say different things by how many random numbers and how much space you put between them. And I had a pitch control, so the bad guys could blah, 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 speak really low, and the really annoying guys could speak really high. And Q*bert was your average everyman. And when he gets hit on the head and falls, and since it's random numbers, he has an infinite vocabulary. He just talks and talks and talks and talks. And the frightening thing is, because it's random and because we have pattern recognition, we think he's saying something. So Gottlieb got letters insisting that the game was saying profane things. Letters from parents and operators who had complaints from patrons in bar because the thing talked during attract mode, and they would think it was saying stuff. It's just, no, not. Though I did hear it say Radio Shack once. My association with Gottlieb ended slightly before this event in 1983. And you could spend 20 minutes talking about why that happened. But there was a serious downturn in the demand for coin-operated devices, whether they were video games or coin-operated games, right around 1983-84. Many of us had left the industry by then because the writing was sort of on the wall. The math was, well, if one Pac-Man makes $200 a week, 2 Pac-Men make $400 and on it. So if I have 20 Pac-Men, they make this enormous amount of money. So they stopped buying games because they had an enormous number of Pac-Mans making a lot of money. So many of us fled, and I fled to a company called Action Graphics. And this detail shouldn't be important to you, but as pinball aficionados, Action Graphics is an interesting waypoint on the history of pinball. Because some of the associates who had also fled coin-op to work in this company, which did games for the Atari 400, 800, ColecoVision Atom, Commodore 64, were some interesting guys.
Lonnie Ropp from Screamin' Holler, Kentucky.
Well, he's really from Iowa. But if you don't know, Lonnie is in charge of development at Data East, it's now Stern Pinball, and has been for a very long time. And if you look up his creds, he's programmed probably 20 pinball games. And at Action Graphics, his big product was Richard Scarry's best electronic word book ever, featuring Lowly Worm. And if you ever somehow go to a conference and see Lonnie, just mention Lowly Worm. He has a great laugh, and you'll be sure to hear it. This other guy is Richard Ditton, and you may not know him. He's a very quiet kind of guy. He is interesting in pinball history for another reason, and we worked together at Action Graphics. And the biggest thing that he ever did was a game for the Commodore 64 called Winter Games, which sold a boatload of copies. It was quite successful. And then there was this other guy who worked at Action Graphics. Does anybody know who that is? Pat Lawler! And he did a few things in pinball. So we're beginning to work our way toward, it was interesting that these three people, certainly Lonnie and Pat, have touched an awful lot of solid-state pinball games. Now, we moved the scene to incredible technologies. Action Graphics, through really a bad business model, failed horribly. And we were all left being owed 3 months of salary. So what did we do? We started a company, Richard and Elaine, who had worked at Action Graphics, and me. And we started in our houses, working out of our bedrooms, doing things, conversions, and we did some original games. And eventually, incredible technology found its best destiny, making kits to sell to operators. Some of those operators who had owned 100 Pac-Mans and discovered that some small percentage of them weren't earning like they should, they could buy a kit from us, use their monitor, use their case, use their power supply, throw away the wires, throw away the circuit board, slap our graphics on the side, redo it's a little work, but they could make a new game that would earn money for much less than buying a new game. Capcom distributed our first effort, which was a hit out of the box. It sold a lot of circuit boards. Golden Tee Golf has had a few lives.
Time killers.
And that was the last one. And I did the sounds for all of these when I was there at IT. The other thing that we did that moved us out of our houses and into a 10,000 square foot office, we took a contract from Gary Stern, who was in league with the Japanese and a Chicago distributor, to create a pinball company. Now, they were going to make a plug-compatible system that could use the Williams logic board. Now, pinball being slightly litigious, no, we invented the pop bumper. No, we invented the slingshot. I'm going to sue you, that kind of thing. They had to be very careful. So they needed a company who had enough smarts to be able to build the operating system for this system that had never done any pinball, so that they could say it was an original piece of work and Williams couldn't sue them for it. So that was us. Richard wrote the operating system and programmed the first game. They didn't care about the soundboard, so I got to design a soundboard from scratch, and the Data East engineers built it. But since they didn't understand the parts that I put on it, they had to fly me there so I could debug it. We could figure out that it worked. And we had a chance to kind of leap forward, certainly on the soundboard, from Williams, because we used really good amplifiers. They never did, but we did. Plus, we had true stereo, hard panned left and right, and we also had a big 6-inch speaker in the bottom of the cabinet. And we had a 12-watt amplifier for each of those. So we had real 2.1 sound for the very first Data East pinball. And IT did 8 games total for Data East. I did 5 of the 8. So this is the first one that I did, and it was the first Data East pin unveiled at a coin-op show in New Orleans just by the skin of its teeth. The show floor opened at 10. At 9:30, we were sweeping up solder. And we brought 3 machines and had enough parts to make 2 of them work. This is level 1. Got to start somewhere. This is, I think, level 3 music. You've locked 2 balls and you're primed for multi-ball. And then this is the time of, we've got to outdo the other company. And there was a guy at Data East who insisted, whatever Williams did, we have to do something. So if they gave out 750,000 points, we would have to give out 1,000,000 points. And so if we're going to have a big event that goes with doing the ramp shot while you still have 2 balls in play during multi-ball, then we need a huge event that lets the player know that you have done this wonderful thing. There's that guy. Rock on. Of course, the danger with an event that long is you probably have drained by now. And you're sitting there waiting to get into the bonus sequence. Second pin. I blew that off. Okay. Here's an interesting fact. At this time in pinball, there weren't a lot of licensed games yet. But games were typically tried to extract some excitement from a current cultural phenomenon. So clearly Secret Service is based on the most recent James Bond movie that had come out at that time. Plus other spy things were interesting at that time.
I have an incredibly nerdy question.
Sir?
First, is that FM synthesis that you're using in that era?
Yes, that is FM.
Okay, and
Is that a dirty question?
Sean's nerdy.
Oh, okay, sorry. That takes all the fun out of it.
And did you actually license the Mission Impossible theme, or did you just try to?
Oh, well, that's an excellent question. I'm just getting to that. While these games typically didn't work off directly a license, like the first one, Laser War, there was some talk and some discussion back and forth between Data East and the company that implemented laser tag. Remember the laser tag guys? Yeah. Okay, but that broke down. So, okay, plan 2, Laser War. And so, okay, but they're beginning to stick their feet into the water of, gee, what would it be like if we had intellectual property from another medium? So, to my knowledge, I think maybe pinball companies may have licensed a tune or tune before this, but Secret Service had licensed 5 tunes. Secret Agent Man, 2 tunes from Mission Impossible, Nobody Does It Better, and something else. So it was the first game, to my knowledge, that actually paid some money to get these mechanical rights. Now, this is a real one. Number 3. The joke around my office. This is the funkiest submarine. And I think it's noted on IPDB that originally when they took that photograph, even the captain there had tights on. And then they painted the stripes down and added cuffs because it was just way too gay. But the babes were great, and that's a tradition in pinball. You need a certain babe factor, but we actually were politically correct. We had a certain amount of man factor too, which could work every which way. Another thing that was not a license, and probably the best-selling game that I did when I worked with Data East, was Time Machine. And can anybody say what this was leveraged off of? That's exactly correct. Back to the Future. So in Time Machine, you work your way, each level of the game is you lock a ball and you work your way to the penultimate goal of doing something. is you travel back a decade. And we picked a radio metaphor for this, right? And we're starting in the 80s, sort of the late 80s.
Time machine.
And I'll say, he asked about, is this FM? And yes, this is FM. And FM is much maligned, but FM is still used. I still use it on Stern pinballs right now for certain things, because FM is great at certain things, but it's not completely an orthogonal synthesis method. You can't make all sounds with FM. And one of the hardest things to make with FM is to make good snare drums. And I'm particularly proud of these snare drums. These are good snare drums. So, we start in the 80s, we travel back from the 80s to the 70s. And yes, I know technically Pac-Man is 1980, but we're going to throw it back into the 70s.
Return to the 70s.
I just couldn't resist.
Psychedelic, man.
Sound guy was the voice talent. And then you went all the way back to the 50s. And one of the things that was kind of fun about this game is we actually had a real electromechanical chime unit in the game that we only used when you traveled back to the 50s. We turned off all the electronic game sounds and then just played chime sounds for the score reels and for all the targets and stuff. But you won't hear that because this is just
another dimension. Return to the 50s.
And I'm not going to say much about this. It's just by the time I'd done the 5th game, I was also the programmer, and I maintained the sound system, and I added and built and had done a lot of things to it so that I could make the sound system more responsive when you were playing the game. So there are tunes in here that every time you achieve a mid-level game goal, the pitch of the tune goes up a half step. And then all the other game sounds that occur transpose themselves to go with the background. And there's a bunch of other stuff that was done. Though, if you played the game, it's for a football game, you wouldn't, the sum total of doing all that sophisticated stuff is just to make the music more continuous, make the music sound more like music, and less something being chopped and diced by somebody hitting targets. And that's Frank Gifford in the background. 1 million. Okay. So I did some more stuff at IT that you don't need to know about. And in '93, I came west. Microsoft Research brought me here to help them work on user interface sounds for advanced user interfaces. And I did that for 7 years. And that's another talk. I took a break in 2000, and I did a lot of things that I like to do, woodworking, and taught myself some guitar. And I built a studio because I knew I was going to have to go back to work. I'm a young man. And I knew that I was going to need to work. And I wanted to work independently, though, so I built a studio up so I could work as a contractor and do things for people. And so I got a phone call from that Lonnie guy. So it's, a lot of who you know and who trusts you.
Pirate's life for me.
I flew to Chicago. That's Chicago traffic. Dennis Nordrum did that Whitewood. That's sort of my sound interpretation of working on a Disney license. And that's the programmer.
There. All right, David. You wanted to know where the left orbit was. This is the left orbit. Here's the here's the flippers, right? Here's the left orbit, and the left orbit goes up like this underneath this underneath the exit of this back here. It goes like this, and then into the top popper here. This popper pops up and gives you to this upper playfield over here on the right. And then here's the ramp that leads to the plunder area. Here's the shot that destroys the ship, and then the ball will take you to here where it'll stop for the Kraken jackpots, and then it'll go into the jets for the sword fight or whatever else we do during Kraken battle.
Whatever else we do.
Here's the shot that goes into the center eject. The ball. This is an exit out of the lane, out of the jets. This is the Jack the Monkey sits right here, and the ball will come like this. Here's the chest. The ball is going to rest on the way into the chest. The ball will first sit on a magnet. We will open the chest, and then I'll throw the ball into the chest using the magnet. So I guess that needs to be added to the list. The throw sound. Then here's the right orbit and the spinner. Here's the spinner. Here's the right orbit, and the right orbit goes into the jets. The top thing, the top playfield, which we'll show you again over there maybe. The top playfield comes this way, and we're calling that, Jack is drunk. This is walk the plank, and we don't have a real theme for this yet.
Wait, where's the plank?
This is right here. This is the center lane. This is the left lane, the center lane, and the right lane. The left lane is drunk. This is Jack drinking. The center one is walking the plank, and the right one doesn't have a theme yet, and any suggestions are welcome. I hope that helps. Thanks, David.
These are early days, and I didn't stay in Chicago. I just went for 3 days. So I come back home, and this is actually not the way I collaborate with these guys most of the time. They mostly don't send me videos. But it was early days and us trying to figure out how to do the work 1,791 miles apart from each other. It actually works pretty well. I'm happy with it. Partially because I don't have to go to any of those meetings. So now here I am. It's been 17 years since I did Monday Night Football. And what's changed? Obviously, the games have changed somewhat, though less than you'd think. For me, what had changed is there's more memory. The first 5 games that you heard, everything was done with synthesis, and the program and the tables and the data and everything that ran synthesis did that out of 8,000 bytes of memory. And the speech, all the speech that you hear in the game was out of 64,000 bytes of memory, 72,000 bytes. And we were glad to have it, because actually the stuff that I did at Gottlieb, Qbert, and that was done out of 2K. That's just magic at some point. It's all tricks and mirrors and crazy programming nonsense to do something with 2K. Okay, so what do we got? It's 2006. We have a lot more memory. I calculated it. We don't have 100 times more memory. We don't have 200 times more memory. We have 388 times more memory. That's a lot more memory. I mean, really. Well, the digital gods give and they take away. So clearly, now that you've got all this memory, you can just take an approach where anything you can record, you can put into the pinball game. Just anything. With reasonable fidelity, and you can just play it back. So how good can something sound? In the old days, it was, well, you had 5 voices that you could spend on music and 3 voices that you had to hold in reserve for sound effects. So in 5 voices, you had to make music. I mean, that's just like a very small ensemble where each guy can play 1 note at a time. You play snare drum. Don't touch anything else. You play bass. And so that's very limiting. And the fact that the games in the 80s sounded like music at all is a miracle. Now we just record stuff. That's the good news. Sort of the bad news, though, is that, well, you've recorded it. At runtime, when you play it in the game, what can you do with it? Well, On the new pinball system from Stern, for which World Poker Tour was the first use, you have 5 channels of that playback, 5 mono channels. You can start a sound, you can stop a sound, you can tell a sound when you get to the end, play it again, you can loop it. The stuff is stored compressed, and depending on how much you compress it and how much you loop it and stuff, you basically have between 9 and 15 minutes of raw material to do a whole pinball machine. That's not so bad. I mean, this is actually pretty good. There are ways you can improve it, but this is great, and we only waited 17 years for this. So I'm going to switch gears and talk about the major factors that determine why a Stern pinball machine sounds like a Stern pinball machine. For me, the number one thing is fun for the player. But what is that? I mean, everybody can say that. Yes, I believe in world peace and fun for the player. But I'm going to get into some of the details of what I think are the components of fun for the player. One of the simple things that sound can do is a no-brainer, is as Gary introduced me, turn off the sound on a solid-state machine and see how lively it is. That's where I keep my machines, in the garage. And that's the one that they shipped me from Chicago. So Pirates of the Caribbean. But the idea is that you provide a lot of energy for the activity. And that's, it could be good or bad. But in any case, sound will clearly do that. A more important thing is to reinforce the license. Modern games, well, whether it's a licensed license or a theme, an arbitrary theme that's been picked out of a hat, whatever you do to make it more fun, you want to reinforce that notion. Now, if it's a licensed theme and you've come to the table with a real feeling for Family Guy, everything that we can do in the game that will tickle those Family Guy receptors in your brain probably will make it more fun for you. So one of the ways that we want to do that is if you have a pirate game, you'd like music that was kind of like pirate stuff. Now, pop bumpers here are themed with the sounds of a sword fight. And the music, when you go into that area of the playfield in Pirates of the Caribbean, changes to this specific battle music, which I hope evokes the sort of notion of guys, sweaty, swarthy guys with eye patches and parrots. Another thing you can do is you can leverage directly off of something that's memorable from the license. In Family Guy, Chris, the son, has an evil monkey who lives in his closet. And whenever that monkey shows up in the show, they play this sort of horror music stinger that's a cliche for bad things. Now, we couldn't use theirs, but I wrote one that leverages off the license. Every time you hear that, if you're familiar with Family Guy, you just know we're in that part of the playfield and we're dealing with the evil monkey. For Indiana Jones, I thought it was just a no-brainer for me to do a sound that's canonical for him. Sounds you associate with Indiana Jones. For me, the number one is his whip. He uses the whip, I think, in all 4 films. And it just seemed to me to be obvious that slingshots should be whips. And that the sound of a whip is a lot like a slingshot. So, it was easy for me. I just had to find good whip sounds and provide them to the programmer. Another thing that Gary talked about, and I very much believe in, is sound makes the game more fun because it helps tell the player what's going on. Sounds tell the player what's happening. You've hit something, something is enabled, time is running out. There are 2 reasons why sounds are really almost more important than any other way of getting information in a pinball game. One is that you're not quite functioning blind when you're playing pinball, but you certainly are suffering from tunnel vision because you spend an awful lot of time looking at the bottom third of the playfield because you're trying to keep the ball in play. You glance up, you look at things, you try to get some sense of what's going on, but you do spend a lot of time looking down here. Okay, you hear the sounds all the time. Another thing is with your eyes, even if you're just standing to the side of a pinball game, the ball moves very fast. And it sometimes can be ambiguous as to whether it actually hit that target or not. You can't even tell by looking whether I did. But if it makes a sound, it's unambiguous. You did that thing. So sounds really are a primary dominant channel if you're not in France where they have the sounds turned off. If you're in America where the sounds are turned on, sound is a dominant channel for providing awareness of what the heck you're doing. And if you do that right, I'll argue it's more fun. Okay, why do games sound like they do? Game design, obviously. For me, sound design equals game design. I don't do anything that doesn't somehow work with the game design. That is a whitewood of Wheel of Fortune. And that's one of the first inputs that are useful for me. Where are the inserts? Label the inserts so I know what they are. If there's a light in an insert, that means, unless they change it, that's going to be some kind of game event or some state in the game that probably is going to need a sound or a level of music or something. So this is the first bit of information that I get that really helps me start nailing down the inventory of things that I'm going to need to create. The next thing that determines it is the game designer. Ultimately, this is a collaborative group process. I'm not going to determine what the sounds sound like. Ultimately, at the detail, I will. But I take major direction from the game designer. He equals the director for a movie. Now, he may be two guys, and it varies from game to game as to who's the really strong guy and who's going to call the shots. The best example I have is from Spider-Man, where it was determined early on by a very strong designer, who happens to be in the room, that the music that is associated with the license just wasn't strong enough for pinball. Really wasn't strong enough generally. And that we wanted some really strong, aggressive music to go with Spider-Man. Okay, that's the Sandman. Okay, another thing that determines it is the license, obviously, is the theme of the license. So it's a constraint. You can just say it's, points you to an area where you should be trying to make your sounds. And a pirate game really shouldn't have a whole lot of electronic sounds. But a pinball has a whole lot of abstract events. I mean, what do slingshots necessarily mean to pirates? There's a lot of things which aren't really themed very strongly, even by the game designer. So it can be sometimes challenging to, come up with the right stuff. Another example is the music of Family Guy. The show is themed, their music is highly influenced by the music from sitcoms, situational comedies from the 50s and 60s. Not from the 70s or 80s. It's a very specific thing, kind of derived from old-time radio. So when I did the original music that wasn't based on the license, I tried to stay with it. So hopefully that reinforces that Family Guy license, because this is that kind of silly music that they always use. But most important of all these things are the rules of engagement. Because we're working with licenses primarily, I haven't done a game yet that isn't a license. The licensor has rules, has constraints, has desires, and will approve and not approve things, and will let you do things and not let you do things. And these rules of engagement, which I've come to call them, determine a lot of what's going to end up in the game. So I've broken it down into the three major assets. We're doing okay. Music. Gary Stern, can sign a contract and buy mechanical rights. for music. And when he does that, that's what he gets. He doesn't get that piece of music, but that's all you get. You get the notes, the changes, the words. You're going to have to perform it somehow. And if it needs to sound in a certain way, you're going to have to figure out how to do that. But you buy mechanical rights, and they're typically a lot cheaper than buying performance rights. In 5 games, the only game that we've ever purchased performance rights for is Indiana Jones. And it's worth every penny, right? Well, it's prehistory for me. I can't say that it's never been done in coin-op, but I'm just going to constrain this stuff to what I know. For the 5 games that I have done, we only purchased the London Symphony Orchestra with 90 guys in London with John Williams waving his stick in front of them, performing the Indiana Jones March. That's what that piece is called. And that's behind all the main gameplay. And it was worth every penny. You start that game up and you hear that, and the license leaps out at you and it threatens to devour you. Okay, speech. You, ideally, would like to get original actors. In fact, you'd like to get them all into a room, reading your custom pinball script, talking about multi-balls and return lanes and stuff. This doesn't happen very often. However, it has happened.
You're making a mockery of this game.
Wonder how they keep those balls so shiny.
Multi-ball? I like the sound of that.
Tonight's top story, Man Bangs Machine. Film at 11.
Unleash the silver orbs.
Basically, you should look at my map is the main bullet point of this presentation.
This is a home run. We gave him some money and a pinball machine on a Saturday. He came into a studio. We had faxed this enormous script. It had like 500, 600 phrases in it. He just got down to business because he was going to a Family Guy Christmas party and didn't really want to be here. And he just nailed it. He's a brilliant guy. And in 6 characters, and he can just go back and he can like talk to himself as Stewie and then do Brian. And then, I mean, he's a scary guy, but it was great. And that was a home run, right? Just one recording session. We got the 6 characters. Plus, well, I'll get to that.
You call that a multi-ball? Even Parker shoots better than that.
So for Spider-Man, we hired the actor J.K. Simmons, who in all the movies plays the editor, J.J. Jamison. And I liked this choice because he's very suitable for pinball. He's very aggressive, and you'll be able to hear him. And frankly, I had doubts about the Tobey Maguire stuff. Hi, I'm Spider-Man. You know, he's kind of down here. When he's going, woohoo, that's good. But he wasn't nearly as suitable as J.K.
I'm sorry, Keith. You lose your extra ball.
Tonight's game is brought to you by Stern Pinball.
Pat Sajak was a trooper, and it's interesting that I don't know how we got him to do that, because there have been a lot of derivative products made from the Wheel of Fortune license over 25 years. And to my knowledge, he's participated in none of them. And somehow he wanted that free game and the money. And we had a long recording session with him. There are more lines of speech in Wheel of Fortune than there are in pretty much the other 4 games combined. And Charlie O'Donnell's a great guy too, that announcer. How old do you think Charlie is? 70. Oh, dude, I think he is 70. Doesn't sound 70 to me, does he? Does? Okay. I guess I'm just getting up there. Well, Charlie was an announcer for American Bandstand when it wasn't in California, when it was still in Philadelphia. So, I mean, he's been doing this for 40 years, and he sounds like a spry 50 to me. Okay, well, let's say you can't get the original actors. Then you have to deal with their right of first refusal. So all these contracts are written such that if Johnny Depp wants to charge Data East, Stern Pinball, $100,000 to come into a studio for 45 minutes and do Captain Jack stuff, that's it. Which means you're not going to have him do it because Stern Pinball is not going to spend $100,000 on Johnny Depp. And that's true across the board for films. These guys all have right of first refusal. So first you have to get them to say no. Then some of the studios are trying to protect their intellectual property, so they already have guys who sound like the characters in their movies.
That beastie's the foul pet of Davy Jones.
So that's the Disney sound-alike for Johnny Depp. I think he sounds more like Captain Jack than Johnny Depp does. He sounds really good. I mean, he could just do this. And every once in a while, he would start losing it. So then they would play some portion of the soundtrack of the first movie. And okay. And then he'd get it again and he'd do some more. It was a great recording session. Or a Stern-approved sound-alike. That's level 3, where they don't have a sound-alike, and they'll let you try to find one, but you have to audition him. Okay, there's also the stuff, how much dialogue can be pulled. By that I mean, these are all based on TV shows and movies, so they talk, and maybe there's some speech that they already do that you could repurpose in the pinball machine. And so the range of response from the licensor is none, like Disney, or pull what you want, go nuts. That was kind of what Fox let us do with Family Guy. And I went through 92 half-an-hour episodes over and over looking for little phrases and things. Oh, that would be good for that. Okay, and the last rule of engagement are sound effects. And there are, again, a range of responses. No, you can't have any of them. Make your own. We'll do it. This isn't so bad. You can give them a list of, gee, we really like those whip cracks from the bar scene in Tibet in the first movie of Indiana Jones. Can we have those? And they send you WAV files. That's what Lucasfilm do. They were very cool. The other response is the Fox response. Well, we didn't get to use any sound effects from Family Guy, but for Spider-Man, it was, here's a pile of DVDs. And actually, it was more complex than that. But yeah, we used a ton of sound effects that came from the soundtrack of Spider-Man in the game. And that helps. I extracted over 700. Now, 700 weren't used, but that's what I gave to the programmer and say, go nuts. Okay, I already played, so I'm going to end up the talk. I think I've got time, yeah. I've just put together some of my favorite bits, things I liked, and things that perhaps you haven't really heard, even if you've played these games, just because most of these are musical, and in multi-ball and some of these events, there's so many sound effects happening on top of them that you probably haven't heard these. We've already heard the sword fight. Up in the upper left-hand corner of Pirates of the Caribbean is a spinny disc. And you can get a number of balls in there. And you can, ooh, I haven't tried this yet. See those? Those are switches. And they go all the way around here. This disc spins. There are multiple balls in there. Guess how many switch hits are happening when that happens? Many, many. Okay, so you probably have never heard this music. And I like this one because this was kind of at the tail end of the development of Pirates of the Caribbean. And being a lounge musician, I was just getting my orchestral legs. I was figuring out how to use all the instruments. And so I used clarinets here, and I was very proud of that. Now, the thing that makes that a party is that every time you hit a switch hit, you get the sound of a wench being wenched, or a gunshot, or some glass breaking. Basically, the sounds of pirates' rest and recreational kinds of activities. And there's a boatload of them, so you really don't hear that music too much unless they take a break, which they never did. Family Guy, I just liked Happy Hour. I think when I looked at, I had all these choices. I think I picked some of the ones where I actually sing. And it's just like an ego thing. That's why I picked Happy Hour. It's an exalted state in Family Guy. When you hit the beer can, you get Family Guy, Happy Hour, and I think all your scores are 2x. Get down. Okay. Then Crazy Chris. This is my favorite piece from Family Guy. It's just because it was a trick. Crazy Chris has the evil monkey in his closet. There's an episode or two where Chris starts showing teenage tendencies of rebellion, that gets into a heavy metal band and becomes despicable. He's normally kind of mild and insanely stupid. So we had a mode called Crazy Chris. And so you needed music for that. Now, Seth Green does the voice for Chris in the show. We only got cooperation and custom stuff from Seth MacFarlane. So I had gone down into the Family Guy mines and dug up things. And I knew I had an inventory of Seth Green stuff that, if I manipulated it properly, could make it sound like he had come into the studio and done like a rap piece for us. So that's this.
Oh, monkey. Who's gonna protect me? Oh, monkey. From the evil monkey in my closet. Oh, monkey. All right. In my closet. Holy crap, no! I'm Chris. Hey, a Twinkie.
Haha. What fun. I like that one. Okay. Spider-Man, I just picked out a couple songs that I really liked, that I enjoyed doing. Now, this was great fun for me because my professional career, when I got paid to play, I was always a keyboard player, and I played in rock bands. And there's nothing less rewarding than playing keyboard in a rock band because there are those guys out front, singers and guitar players, doing that thing, and that phallic instrument. And you just don't get as many girls as you do if you're a guitar player. So doing this game, I got to do some guitar. Now, I actually don't play guitar much, but I have samples and things. And so it was really fun to make guitar music. And these fingers that you've been seeing, these are Ray Tanzer's fingers. He was holding up the prototypes that I happened to be in Chicago when they got the prototypes back for the figures that Stern paid money for to have custom molded so they could feature the characters in the game. So Ray was holding them up. I said, hold that up. I took pictures. Oh, and Doc Ock. This is something I like to do whenever I can. If possible, I like to take some aspect, or perhaps the name of the character, and make it into a lyric so you can sing along. So in this song, you can try. It's Doc Ock. And just keep doing that. Wheel of Fortune. Well, Wheel of Fortune wasn't my favorite music metaphor. However, you can always find something that's fun. It's part of the game, just like Wheel of Fortune does. They go on location and they give out trips. And there was supposed to be humor in the game where we gave out really stupid trips. So some of them weren't so bad, but they were kind of dumb.
Catch the big waves and the big jackpots surfing in Hawaii.
So I got to make these prototypical tunes for the destinations, and that was a lot of fun. And in fact, I got to write a tune. For this one, I started when I was 15, 1965, and that time when people learned how to be in bands, they got a Ventures record. And they sat there, and they listened to it, and they copied the licks, and everybody could play Wipeout and those Pipeline and those songs. So the game designer wanted Wipeout, but they wouldn't buy the mechanical rights for Wipeout. And he specifically wanted the Gary Hoey version of Wipeout, who's a fairly modern, thick, heavy metal guitar player, which I did. Sony, who owns Wheel of Fortune, rejected that. They said, no, 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 it's surf music. It's got to sound like the Beach Boys. Okay, that's what they want. So I got to write a Wipeout-like song, and I actually play guitar on this. Okay, the idea behind this one was, in my mind, what if Africa had their own version of Wheel of Fortune? Because they do. Wheel of Fortune, there's like one in the Ukraine and all these French Wheel of Fortune. They have licensed this thing all over the place. So what if there was an African one? This would be the theme. And if you can tell, they're all singing big money, big money, big money, big money, which is that chant that the players do while the wheel is spinning. Big money, big money, big money, big money. Wheel. Big money, big money, big money, big money. Wheel. And then the kalimba chorus comes in. Okay. The last one that was a lot of fun, it was different for me, was the game designer had mentioned to me how much fun it would be, Dennis. Yeah, Dennis. Is Dennis? Yeah. Dennis, how much would be fun, because there are some people at Stern who play musical instruments, how much fun it would be if we could incorporate some of them so that at the next big pin festival they could put the Stern band on the stage and play the hits from Wheel of Fortune. Well, it just wasn't time. However, we did do this one. And if you ever call technical service at Stern, you get Joe. And he's one hell of a good guitar player. So I sent him backing tracks, basically music minus guitar. He sent me back the guitar, and then I put it together. You get this. Alrighty, last one. All these have been music, my favorites, but I really like this sound effect. It had to be good because it's for the biggest toy on the playfield. It's a mystical, bizarre toy that has powers beyond comprehension kind of thing, and every time you hit it, you want to know you hit it, and you also want to be feeling, you know, ooh, that was cool. And it's typical I make multiple versions of these because I don't have a synthesis platform here. I just play things back. So I would like some variety, as much as space will allow me to do, and as much patience as I have with the programmers to, when you get to this event, pick this one. So there are 3 of those. And I just like that one. Okay, one of the problems with buying the performance rights of John Williams and his London Symphony Orchestra is that everything that I do has to somehow stand up next to it and not sound cheesy. Well, you know, the way movie scores get made, there's a music editor who looks at the movie and he says, well, there should be music here and should be music here. And they give a big long list to John Williams. Then he sits there and he makes the music, writes the tunes and stuff. Then he hands that off to an arranger who arranges it for the spots. He hands that off to probably 3 or 4 orchestrators who figure out that the oboes and the bassoons and the string viol should play here and not here and do this and that. Then a copyist makes copies of all that shit and they give that to 90 guys in a room, a big recording studio on a day, And John Williams stands in front of that and waves his arm. And in a day, 2 days, maybe 12 hours, they can record the whole score for a movie. That's because they have 150 guys working on it. Now, there's me. And I have the same task, and there's me. So this is what I did for Cairo Swordsman. And of course, I studied John Williams like crazy, just for style and orchestration and stuff. But it's original work, and it's original orchestration, and it's an orchestra that I purchased for $1,000. So here it goes. And I went back to the original scene in the first movie, and, you know, that's similar in style to the kind of music he had. It was almost this Broadway musical crazy thing where he's running around, Marion's running around, there are baskets and monkeys and Germans and guys, and then they encounter this guy. Oh, yeah, and then if you score it, so that's the one shot. And the fanfare that tells you did it. Okay, then we have multi-balls. We have special events in the game, and they're themed with the movies. So they're all based on action scenes from those movies, and they all deal with the same question that John Williams deals with. How do I take the Indiana Jones stuff and the action theme and make it seem like it's for India and China, which is the Temple of Doom, as opposed to what the first one was and what the third one was. Okay, and just about my second to last example. Last Crusade, again, the same problem, except now they're in Vienna and they're in Berlin. And it's pre-war Germany, and we have a lot of stormtroopers and guys goose-stepping, and that's the theme, so that's what I played off of. And sometimes everything doesn't go as planned. So I always have to work ahead of these guys, because if I waited for them to get the game done, they would be manufacturing it next Monday, and they would give me a list of a whole bunch of things they needed. So I can't let that happen. So everything that even vaguely looks like it might be something, I try to compose something for it. And I had speech. I had speech that referred to a mine-car hurry-up, that mine-car chase scene at the end of Temple of Doom. I'd seen art for it. It was a pretty sure bet that I was going to need a 30-second piece of music that was a timer that you probably started a mine-car hurry-up off the Last Crusade, the mystery hole, and you'd start that merry chase. Well, it didn't happen. But it was a nice piece of music, and ultimately Lonnie liked the music, so when you enter your initials, should you be so lucky as to get a high score, you'll hear the mine car hurry up music. See, that last part is the most intense part, and that just loops on there. That tells you your time is almost up. You're down to 10 seconds, 9 seconds, 8 seconds. So the music's meant to also, besides just make energy, to also tell you we start here and build to a crescendo and let you know that you've got to do what you were supposed to do to score the mine car hurry up feature. I didn't realize the music. Acknowledgements, I have to acknowledge my wife, who is half the team of Odd for Int. Though you actually heard her. She's the one that sings Yo Ho, Yo Ho at the beginning of Pirates of the Caribbean. But otherwise, she just basically allows me to work 7 days a week without having to worry about getting provisions or cleaning or doing any of that stuff. And so Stern pinballs would not sound the way they sound if not for her contribution, which is critical. Also, I want to thank Stern Pinball. They granted me explicit rights to be able to play some of the things that I've done. They own them, but they let me show them to you. Not explicitly. I took a lot of those images that I shared with you from IPDB and from Pinball News, not many. And so, should this be redistributed, we'll have to negotiate something, I'm sure. And if for some reason you want to contact me, I look at that every day. daudioguy@verizon.net. That's it. Now, I'm supposed to run some 4-question thing? Or am I doing real questions? Let me do real questions.
If anyone asks a question, could you please go to the mic?
That's right. We need you to go to the mic so this will be captured for forever.
Well, seeing as how I'm here, David,
Sir.
what's the next thing you're working on?
Well, formally, nothing. Theoretically, I don't think I can talk about it, but I know I'm going, okay, I do these on a game-per-game basis. I'm not a Stern employee. They contact me and they ask me, would you do this? And I say, okay. And I finally got to the point after having done 5 of them that I was exhausted and I needed a break. So there's actually somebody else who, and I think this is common knowledge, that Batman is being worked on. And somebody else is doing the sound for Batman. And I would love to be able to tell you his name, but I forgot it. And I didn't do Shrek either, because I was really, really busy doing Indiana Jones. But, so what am I doing next? I theoretically will start on the next game in the middle of August. And I know what the title is, but with Stern Pinball, if you're talking about more than 2 weeks out, it's probably a lie. So, no, I can't say, because I really don't know. I assume I'm going to do another one. They seem to have been pleased with what I've done so far. Sir.
My turn.
Okay, first of all, mad props for your work all through the years. I've appreciated the stuff you've done all the way back to Gottlieb on the Qbert Reactor Mad Planet stuff. I shamelessly stole the music from Mad Planets for a computer demo I made back then.
Really?
Reproduced it on the Atari 400 as best I could.
Well, given the number of
awesome.
units that Mad Planet sold, more people probably heard your version than mine.
I just had a couple of questions. I was intrigued by how you take care of doing dialogue when you don't have the original actors. I wondered what proportion of the re-recorded dialogue is provided by the original companies. You were saying they have in-house impersonators versus Stern impersonators. I wondered what that ratio was.
You know, I'd have to give you 5 answers because it varies. That's why these rules of engagement are specific to every project. For instance, in Pirates of the Caribbean, we were allowed to use 0 dialogue pulled from the films, none, nada. And then what custom stuff we did use, we had to use their Captain Jack impersonator. And then the lines that we wrote, the custom pinball lines, had to be approved by Disney, and they were very strict. One of their rules was Captain Jack couldn't talk about anything that would have referred to a pinball.
Oh.
So what's left? Well, about 275 lines of things that refer vaguely to game modes. He talks about the monkey because the monkey's in the movie. So if you want a weirder one, we licensed the Yo Ho, Yo Ho, the song from the theme park ride that the movie is based upon. But the license that Disney could provide us was that we could only use the lines of Yo Ho that were in the film.
Wow.
So we didn't buy the mechanical rights like to the sheet music of Yo Ho. We bought it through Disney. So you find that there's 1.5 verses. Captain Jack and what's her name dance around a fire getting drunk. They sing a little of it. She sings a little of it at the prow of the ship. I know every instance, right? And in fact, we slipped one in on them because to make 2 complete verses, I had to make up a word or two. And we slipped that in underneath the Disney radar. But yeah, I mean, these rules of engagement are as arbitrary as you can possibly imagine.
It's different on every project, isn't it?
And wildly different on every project. So the other extreme would be Sony with Spider-Man. For sound effects, for the third movie, they not only gave us the rights to use sound effects, they sent me a hard drive that contained the 7.1 stems.
What does that mean exactly?
I didn't know what 7.1 stems was. Turns out, when you mix a major modern picture, you mix it for surround, right? Center, left, right, that's 3.
2 in the back.
4 surround speakers, and a subwoofer. That's 7.1. So when I got Spider-Man 3 stuff, which I got 2 weeks before the movie opened, I had 8 recordings for every second of dialogue in the movie, which allowed me then to go to the back left surround where they had stuck the good explosion that wasn't cluttered by dialogue and pull that. So that's a huge extreme. I don't know if I'll ever get 7.1 stems again, but Sony was cool and gave them to us. And so I had, in fact, Spider-Man 3 as a radio show that I listened to before the movie opened. It wasn't a very good radio show, actually, but it really needed visuals.
Now, just a couple of quick trivia questions. I wondered if you have any, if you got any free guitar solos from Steve Ritchie for any of his games.
Well, we worked together once, and he was back and forth between Chicago and California. So no, actually, I didn't get any. We only crossed paths in Chicago, I think, for. No, I was only there once. Yeah. I had a great time. I had a great time. I love the Spider-Man stuff. Okay.
And one last thing. There's an argument in our arcade about this may be before your time on the Stern Pins, but Lord of the Rings, yes, Saruman saying, "To war!" Is that really the actor? Did you guys have to do that in-house?
Okay. They told me to make up some trivia questions.
I'd love to know the answer.
Well,
I don't know it.
That isn't going to be the answer, but okay. So that gives me question number 2 at least. Okay. I don't know.
You don't know? Okay.
That's what. Yeah. I start with pirates.
I see. All right. Thank you very much.
So you said it's 388 times 64K is what you get, which is like 25 megs or something?
Yeah.
Why do you only get 25 megs in this day and age?
I just gave a similar, not a same talk, but I talked to some computer scientists who were in a graduate program on last Monday. And, I'm telling them all this memory, and they're like, 25 meg? Pooey, we spit on your 25 meg. That's nothing. Well, it's your frame of reference, Actually, I think the SAM pinball board's going to double soon. But the key thing about that memory is that it's flash RAM, so it's easily upgraded. Now, granted, I can go to Costco and I can get 2 gigabytes for $27 that I keep on my keyring. So yeah, it is a good question as to why there isn't more, and I suspect has a lot to do with the architecture of the board, that they use this not a custom processor, but one of these embedded processors who don't bring out that many address lines for memory.
Mhm.
And so that 32 or 64 meg may be the limit of the address pins that come out that they can even address.
Do you feel constrained by it at all, or at some point it's enough is infinite, right? So.
Well, yeah. In some ways, it would be nice to have more. I mean, I would love to have it doubled, because one of the ways we jam more in, especially when there's a ton of speech like Wheel of Fortune, is that we can drop the sampling rate of the speech down by 50%.
Mm-hmm.
So all this stuff that you heard is at 24 kilohertz, and the speech typically, because you need the space, is at 12, and you don't want to go any lower than that. And I would love to see all the speech assets, everything to be no slower, sampled at 24 kilohertz.
Right. And one last question: how do you hire a symphony orchestra for $1,000?
You call this on the web. You can go to eastwest.com, and they have they have silver and gold and platinum versions of their orchestra, which you have to play through MIDI. You have to sequence this stuff up. But and they brute force the problem. A symphony orchestra is 122 gigabytes. And that's what I play, like when I'm playing this stuff. And if I were to use the full boat orchestra, I would need like several computers to hold all that. Not the disk drives to just have enough power in the computer, enough bandwidth and stuff to actually play these huge samples. So they just brute force it. They hold microphone in front of a string section and have them play strings every possible way a string section can play. So you have 42 kinds of articulations for the way strings play. And it's my job as a performer orchestrator to figure out which ones of those I want to use to make an orchestra sound like an orchestra.